Have you ever felt it? The voice in the desert, the cry echoing in the void unanswered, kneeling, heart shattered, begging for a sign, for a word. Your greatest prayer was answered with silence. Think of the moments when faith, once a guiding light, became a starless darkness. That sickness that wouldn't yield, the door that wouldn't open, the miracle that never arrived. What happens when the divine, once a comforting presence, falls silent? When the silence of God is not peace but a brutal provocation to your most intimate faith, it becomes an abyss. The faith they sold you promised answers, comfort, a preordained plan, but reality presents itself raw, merciless, a crisis of faith that drags you to the edge of an existential precipice. Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in hell, reminded us, man does not seek pleasure or happiness, he seeks a meaning for his life. But what if that meaning is forged in absence, in darkness, in pain that does not dissolve? Your soul screams for clarity, but the cosmos responds with a deafening void. This absence, this test, is the silence of God as an answer that demands more from you than any word. If this provocation hit you at your most vulnerable core, if you feel the cold claws of doubt gripping your heart, this video is a brutal mirror, ready to shatter the illusion of an easy faith, ready to face the silence that challenges you. You weren't born with an unshakable faith that demands immediate answers. You were born with the capacity to question, to explore mystery, to seek a meaning that transcends the obvious. But you were programmed for a transactional faith, for a contract where belief guarantees blessing and prayer is a magic formula to get what you want. From an early age, doctrine whispered the lie, ask and you shall receive. Religion taught you to fear doubt. Society bombarded your subconscious with testimonies of instant miracles, of visible providences that validate belief. Your heart was molded to expect clear answers, for a palpable divine presence, for a God who responds on your timeline. This is behavioral engineering in its most subtle and coercive form. A system that keeps you in a state of passive waiting, draining your spiritual autonomy. You were conditioned to seek comfort in promises, to predict divine will, to long for guarantees that life in its complexity can never give. Think of the intermittent reinforcement of the miracle, a small prayer answered, a fortuitous sign, a temporary relief. Each event validates your superficial faith, reinforcing the belief that God acts like a dispenser of desires, keeping you trapped in expectation, and behavioral finance enters here brutally. The faith they sell you often comes with a price. You are conditioned to give to receive, to sow, to reap, to invest in divine blessings with money, time, or sacrifices. The crisis of faith often manifests when the spiritual investment doesn't bring the expected return. You cling to rituals, to offerings, to promises of prosperity as a false barrier against life's uncertainty, spending impulsively to numb the anguish of unanswered prayer, or, worse, paralyzing yourself, unable to act, to trust, because the fear of emptiness is greater than the hope of a deeper meaning. Robert Cialdini, in his Laws of Persuasion, shows how social proof, the multitude who witness, and religious authority, the leader who interprets God's will, are used to manipulate your perception. They sell the illusion of a God who acts like an accountant, delivering results, keeping you in an incessant search for external validation, too exhausted to question the true nature of the divine. You were indoctrinated to love your prison of expectations because it promises false control, a refuge against chaos that, ironically, is fueled by this very unfulfilled expectation. If this programming resonates with you, if you feel the invisible bars of this transactional faith, comment below. I question my conditioned faith. You feel a sharp pain, an existential void radiating from your core, eroding every pillar of your belief. Your mind, a silent battlefield, wages war between what you were taught and what your eyes see, what your heart cries out for. This is your internal fragmentation, the price of your soul surrendered to the crisis of faith. to the deafening silence of a God who falls silent when you scream the loudest. The shadow, according to Carl Jung, is everything you deny within yourself. Your deep doubt, your anger towards the divine, your fear of not being worthy, your very capacity to be flawed without being punished. All this has been silenced, pushed into the unconscious dark, in the name of a perfect faith and the incessant pursuit of a prefabricated purpose. And what you repress commands you from the shadows. It sabotages you in cruel ways. Hence the guilt when questioning, the anguish when doubting, the feeling of being completely abandoned, adrift in an ocean of uncertainties, even surrounded by temples and dogmas. The crisis of faith becomes your invisible tormentor, a heavy chain dragging you into the swamp of silent despair. Gabor explains that the trauma of disconnection from one's own spiritual truth, of the imposition of a faith that does not allow vulnerability, creates a vicious cycle of self-deception. Your own intuition, your innate capacity to feel the divine presence in unconventional ways, atrophies under the weight of a fear that is not yours, but implanted by a faith that demands conformity. You project your shadow onto those who seem atheist, onto those who have lost faith. Because seeing freedom in them, even in the absence of answers, means confronting your own imprisonment, your own denial of a faith that can exist without guarantees. You wear the mask of the unshakable believer, the devoted faithful, but behind it, your soul cries out for authenticity and for a meaning that transcends it. Your identity becomes the crisis itself. You are not who you are. You are the person that the silence of God and the pressure for answers allow you to be, a puppet moved by the strings of existential doubt. How much of your life is spent maintaining this illusion of perfect faith? In feeding the belief that imprisons you? In fighting against a silence that perhaps is the very answer? If this truth provoked you, if you feel your soul contracting before the depth of this emptiness, comment below. I choose my authentic faith. You seek freedom. But why do you feel so empty? Trapped in a faith that demands answers even when the world around you cries out for a meaning not found in ready-made words or empty promises. The freedom they promised you was certainty. But doubt, a silent monster, stole even the ability to trust, the freedom to pray and receive. But divine silence chained you to an expectation, to a transaction that feels hollow and meaningless. This is false freedom, a prison of dogmas, where truth is an illusion and existential emptiness deepens with each unanswered prayer, each unseen miracle. The system sells you the illusion of a God who fits into boxes, who acts according to your will. It transforms your search for a deeper meaning into a dopamine trap, into fleeting spikes of momentary relief when a superficial proof emerges, or when you conform to an incomplete answer. Think of the faith industry. It doesn't need to force you to believe. It just needs to offer a constant flow of rituals, promises of prosperity, solutions to your most mundane problems, in exchange for your blind faith, and profit flows dripping from your spiritual anguish. This is belief capitalism. It profits from your crisis of faith, from your uncertainty, from your inability to find meaning in chaos. Your hope, your energy, your soul, all monetized by the engine of the easy answer that never arrives. Behavioral finance operates here brutally. How often have you found yourself tempted to spend money, time, or resources on promises of miracle cures, of financial blessings, of divine interventions that demanded a material act of faith? The anguish of divine silence shapes your finances, transforming the spiritual quest into yet another form of desperate consumption, a trade for non-existent guarantees. Daniel Kahneman taught us about anchoring bias. Your mind is anchored to the idea of a God who answers with an explicit yes or no. And the faith they sell you is the master of this bias, keeping you in a state of relentless search for external confirmations, of avoiding any step that might lead to the pain of misunderstanding. You are not deciding. You are obeying the voice of doctrine, the script of the ready answer. To maintain the illusory order of your superficial faith, the stability of your own prison of expectations, the manufactured peace of your unquestioned belief. But true freedom, It doesn't hide in ready answers. It is conquered in the acceptance of mystery, in the courage to trust even in the absence of clear signs, to forge an unshakable faith in the pain that does not avoid. If this section resonated with you, if the walls of this conditioned faith seem to vibrate, comment here. I don't want to trade freedom for empty answers anymore. Rupture is not a visible miracle. It is an abyss of silence. It is when you realize that true faith lies not in the answers you demand, but in the courage to sustain doubt, to inhabit mystery, to embrace not knowing. Authentic reconstruction begins in the silence of your soul, in the courage to feel the pain of unanswered prayer, the emptiness of expectation, the absence that does not fill. This stillness is what transactional faith fears most, because it prevents control and demands a deeper surrender. Gabor shows us, the root of the faith crisis that seeks ready answers is the trauma of disconnection from one's own capacity to trust, to surrender to what is greater. Faith that demands guarantees is a flight from the authentic self. The cure is reconnection with your intuition, with the divine presence that manifests in absence and paradox. It is the dark strength that emerges when you stop bargaining with the divine. This is true disobedience. Disobeying the voice of doctrine that wants you at war with doubt, the script of a superficial faith that the system insists on selling. Disobeying your own self-deception. It is an act of radical surrender. It is a choice, an existential choice. To abandon the false security of visible promises, of faith that binds you to results, for the uncertainty of blind trust, for the risk of a spirituality that does not fit into dogmas, for the vastness of a meaning that reveals itself in absence, a freedom that is priceless, because it costs your identity as a perfect believer. Jordan Peterson talks about the order that emerges from taking responsibility, from facing the chaos of a faith crisis and finding meaning in the struggle, in the desert, in the silence. Your faith is not a contract to be fulfilled, but a journey to be lived step by step, even in darkness. You will lose the fear of questioning. You will stop sabotaging yourself with the incessant search for proofs, because there will be no part of you hidden behind guilt. No vital energy wasted fighting a silence that perhaps is the very divine communication. This is freedom. Not the freedom to control God's will, but the freedom to be, to accept, to trust, to live with purpose, with presence, without the faith crisis, without the invisible chains of a conditioned spirituality. If you feel this is the moment to break through the walls of superficial faith, type in the comments, "The conditioned faith programming ends with me," or send this video to someone trapped in the crisis of divine silence, the silence of God as an answer. Your greatest prayer was answered, with silence, an emptiness echoing in a sacred space. In the pain I do not avoid, I forge my unshakable faith, a faith that does not bend to absences, but that blossoms in the deepest mystery. What do you do when faith doesn't give you the answers you implore? You do not seek pleasure or happiness. You seek a meaning for your life, even if that meaning is forged in silence and darkness. You are not your doubt. You are not your crisis. You are not the unfulfilled promise. You are a consciousness capable of transcending the need for guarantees, of finding God in paradox, in the absence that challenges you so deeply. The price of freedom isn't speech, but the courage to break the silence the system imposed on you, the courage to accept the mystery, to trust without seeing, to be your most authentic and raw faith. Choose your unshakable faith. Even if it doesn't bring ready answers, even if it doesn't fit the dogmas that imprison you, this is your deepest freedom, to be who you truly are, beyond expectations, beyond conditioned faith, beyond the silence that perhaps is the very divine voice. If something awakened in you in this video, if doubt transformed into a new certainty in your soul, comment, "I see beyond the veil of divine silence." Share this content with anyone living trapped in the faith crisis that demands answers. And if you want to keep breaking cycles with me, subscribe now. The shadow you avoid controls you. Freedom only frightens, until you discover you were ready all along. Rupture is the beginning. Consciousness is the path to your unconditional faith.